So here we go. Welcome to the Bob Unger Show. And my guest today is Rafi Farber from Israel. Correct?
Correct.
What part of Israel?
I live in the Golan up north.
Ah, near the Golan Heights. That's the name people will.
Yeah. In the Golan Heights. I'm right next door to Trump Heights.
Yeah, well, it always cracks me up when Jews say, "Oh, he recognized the Golan Heights." Why do I need anyone to recognize the Golan Heights? Who needs their recognition? What is it about Jews that they're so insecure that they need affirmation from non-Jews to tell them what is recognized and what isn't recognized?
Oh, that's nothing new. That's been around since we were founded as a nation.
Yeah, exactly. So tell the listeners a little bit about what you do and about your business and your background in general.
Well, I'm a libertarian who lives in Israel. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. But I moved to Israel when I met my wife, and I have a nice family here, thank God. 5 kids, Kenai Nahara, as they say. I became a libertarian in 2012 when I discovered Ron Paul. And I've always been against foreign aid to Israel or Jews accepting any money from foreign powers. I wanted to be as independent as possible, and then all of a sudden I ran into Ron Paul, who was saying these kinds of things. And I became active in the Ron Paul 2012 presidential campaign, and he introduced me to Austrian economics. And the way that came into my life was I have this memory as a child, maybe 8 or 9 years old, where I started to see, even back then, that the prices of everything just kept going up, year after year. And I noticed that things were getting more expensive by the time I was 8, 9, or 10. And I remember asking my father, Abba, like, how can things keep getting more expensive every year? Because eventually everything's going to be $1 million if it never stopped going up. And then he gave me this kind of non-committal answer, like, yeah, but that's how an economy grows. Things get more expensive. And that never made sense. And I remember thinking, like, as a kid, like, that doesn't seem to jive with logic. That can't be. And it kind of I just kind of accepted it because that's what my father said, and that's how the world is. And okay, whatever. And then I discovered the whole Austrian school, and then it suddenly clicked that inflation doesn't make sense. Inflation is not natural. The economy is naturally deflationary because you produce more goods and services, which makes things cheaper. And then more people can afford more stuff, which makes them less poor, which is how society progresses. And that economics is really, it's the study of human interaction, not graphs and charts and shapes and aggregates and all this nonsense. Since the COVID-19 pandemic or plandemic or however you want to interpret, I don't know what's going on. It's all just nuts. But ever since then, I became independent and I started my own service. It's called the End Game Investor, centered around monetary analysis, the commodity exchange, and analyzing precious metals markets from an Austrian economics perspective, with the aim of protecting wealth and protecting resources and profiting from the final inflationary bomb of this fiat money system, which is in its 50th year, which is, the debt jubilee year. And I think it's going to collapse probably within a year, maybe 2. Not much longer than that.
When you use the term fiat monetary system, for those who may not know, it simply means that is declared money that you have to use by government fiat. In other words, by the government will, by the government ordering you to use this piece of paper as a currency for the exchange of goods and services. And
yes.
A lot of people don't know the term. But go ahead, keep going.
What was I saying?
Oh, you're one of the people that voted for Joe Biden. You're 200 years old.
Nope. I can proudly say I did not vote at all this election. I really had no interest in voting. I
Yeah,
saw the whole vote, and maybe like if you really believe in Trump, or you think Biden is really extra crazy evil, which maybe he is. I don't really know. But if you're really into it, then vote. I have nothing against voting, but to me, it's just like voting. It's picking the music you want to hear while the Titanic goes down. I really don't care.
right. It's
However,
like what George Carlin said.
sorry.
I don't know if you remember George Carlin when he
I
said
do remember George Carlin. Yes.
and he said I don't vote, so don't tell me that if I don't vote it's my fault. He said it's your fault because you do vote for these idiots.
Yeah, exactly. And I've been thinking about George Carlin a lot ever since this whole pandemic thing, because I remember he had a bit about his
Germs.
immune system and bathing in raw sewage, and he couldn't stand all this nonsense about bird flu and this and that. And he saw this coming. He saw it coming. He called it, and I just wish he was still alive to yell at everybody.
Yeah.
I miss him so much.
I guess they'd call him a right-wing extremist from the militia today.
Yeah.
So, at any rate, in your service, and by the way, out of curiosity, were you born a religious Jew, or did you become that later on, or was that a process?
Well, I'm kind of a gray area here, because my father is a conservative rabbi, so I grew up around religion and in religion. But was I religious as a kid? Kind of, sort of, and then I was introduced to the more orthodox approach and a more rationalist approach. So I can't really. It's hard to define who I am or what I really believe. I go by my own mind, what makes sense to me. And Judaism, as I see it, makes sense to me. The way I see it, the Jewish nation exists. I mean, we brought libertarianism into the world in terms of the Exodus from Egypt. Whether you want to take it literally or not, that story, the Bible, is about a people who were in slavery, who were released from slavery by the common creator of everybody. And the reason that liberty is a natural right is because we all come from the same source. So we introduced that idea into humanity, and Jews have been the leaders of the Austrian school and of libertarianism. There's Murray Rothbard, there's Mises, Hayek. Maybe he was Jewish; it's unclear. But we're Jews are supposed to lead the liberty movement in the world in whatever permutation it's in. So, I mean, I hope we can do that job. And there are a lot of bad Jews on the other side, on the communist side. I know that we're active on both sides, and hopefully, I can push the Jews and the rest of the world through our people into more of a liberty-minded society.
Well, it's the funny thing. My son once described me when he was very young to somebody as being a libertarian when it comes to government, and a Christian fundamentalist when it comes to morals. Now, he didn't mean literally a Christian fundamentalist. What he was saying is that I am fundamental when it comes to the morality of Judaism. So, can you hear me now, by the way?
Yes.
Okay. So, your service, which deals with an Austrian view, and it also views an end game that's coming.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you juxtapose those two things? How do you relate those two things?
How do I relate Austrian economics and the end game?
Yeah.
Well, Mises talked about the end game back in the 1910s, 1920s in his book Theory of Money and Credit. It happens. This wouldn't be the first time an end game happens. I mean, there was an end game in Germany in 1923 for that monetary system. There have been many hyperinflations in history. There was hyperinflation in Rome, which helped precipitate the collapse of the Roman Empire. These things happen over and over and over again. There's always an end game. There's always the end of a monetary system where the people figure out what is going on, and then they try to get rid of money faster and faster and faster, trying to purchase any real asset that they can get their hands on, because they realize that the money is dying. So the only difference is that in this end game, this would be the first global reset. And I'm not, when I say reset, I'm not talking about like a government planned reset. That's something else. I don't really have much of an opinion on that. But Murray Rothbard, in his magnum opus on Austrian economics, which is Man, Economy, and State, he described the process of hyperinflation not as like a calamity that should be avoided, but it's really the last weapon of society against the systematic theft of money printing. Because if you have the right to print money where nobody else does, then you can pretty much buy anything you want, and that steals value from the holders of that money.
That's called the Cantillon effect, right?
Yeah, yeah. So what happens is that when the people finally figure this out and realize that it's really the purchasing power of money that is falling, then they start attacking it and they start spending as fast as possible. So this is Mises's endgame, and this is what is going to happen to the dollar. I think not in terms of like Americans suddenly buying as much food as possible, which could happen, and we saw bits of that in March and April during the initial lockdown panic. And by the way, food inflation, the price of food, is rising about at a 4% clip, which is higher than the inflation rate of the 1970s. It just happens to be that a lot of the products that are on the consumer price index that's registered by the government are like plane tickets and travel, which are now impossible to buy because of all these quarantines and lockdowns. So like the fact that the prices of those things are going down does not say anything about the purchasing power of the dollar. But what happens is that people see that the money's losing value, and then they take that and they start spending it faster and faster, and then it just loses all value. And when that happens, the price of gold goes to infinity, which doesn't mean, when the price of gold goes to infinity, which happens in every hyperinflationary economy in the history of the world, does not mean that gold is now infinite value. It just means that the paper that used to represent that gold is now zero. And even though we're not on a gold standard, the only reason that the dollar can buy anything is specifically because it can still buy some amount of gold. But at the moment when the dollar can no longer buy any amount of gold, meaning the price of gold is infinity in dollar terms, then the dollar is dead. It can't buy anything.
What do you respond to the drones, as I characterize, who will say to you, what are you talking about? The dollar is the world's reserve currency. America is the most powerful nation on earth, and nothing could ever supplant the dollar. What would be your response?
Well, America is not special in the sense that it can break the laws of economics. It can't. There is no, just like your great grandparents used to say, money doesn't grow on trees. You cannot print money and expect it to continue to survive. It has never happened in world history, and this won't be the first exception. If you look at, we can always already see evidence of this happening. If you look at the price of soybeans, if you look at the price of wheat, the price of corn, they've all skyrocketed since March. And what's really happening is that countries with a lot of dollars, this isn't suddenly that wheat is getting more expensive. It's that the countries that are importing a lot of this stuff, and the biggest importer, for example, soybeans, is by far China, which I think imports like 90% of soybeans that are produced every year in the world. The biggest soybean importer on the planet. Their dollar reserves are dropping. If you look at the Treasury International Capital figures, which is the amount of treasuries that foreign central banks own, China's holdings of this stuff has dropped since March. They are not financing these deficits anymore. It's all being financed by commercial banks, which are then flipping it to the Federal Reserve. What's happening is the Treasury makes record auctions. Every single Treasury note auction from 2 years to 10-year maturities, from the middle of the curve, these Treasury notes auctions, they're all being bought by commercial banks, and we're flipping them right back to the Federal Reserve. There's no foreign demand anymore. So sooner or later, and it's already happening, these countries are going to start dumping all of their dollar reserves for anything that they're going to need, like wheat, soybeans, basic staples. This is already happening. But eventually it's gonna get so fast. You're gonna see the dollar index, the exchange rate, just plummet. You know, one day I see one day, it could be any day now, it could be any time, that the dollar index will just drop by 10%, and everybody was like, "What is going on?" And then once that happens, then the dollar cost of imports suddenly skyrockets, and then since Americans import all their consumer goods, that's when you start to see the domestic prices start rising very, very fast. But it'll start on the foreign exchanges from foreign countries who are already dropping their dollars. It's already happening. There's no stopping it now.
And how do you foresee, if any way, a way to protect yourself as much as possible, economically and physically, from what is coming?
Well, economically, I advise my subscribers to own gold, silver.
When you say gold, are you saying physical gold, or are you saying what?
It depends what you want to accomplish. I don't know exactly how the end game is going, what the end game is going to look like. I'm not like envisioning a zombie apocalypse. I'm not gonna let my imagination run wild on that. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I just know it's not going to be fun. So depending on what you think personally, if you are, you know, a prepper who thinks, you know, really there's going to be a total breakdown of law and order, maybe there will be. I don't know. But if you really think that is going to happen, then yeah, I would suggest you own physical gold and silver somewhere where you can physically access it. And I advise my subscribers, physical silver is more useful, because gold will just be too valuable and be too dangerous to carry around. But you know, I'd say 6 months to a year of consumer expenses in silver coins would you know, be a good buffer zone, and you should probably be armed, you know, with some guns or some kind of self-protection. If you can, you know, you should have some real estate somewhere in the backcountry where you're not in an urban area, because there's going to be riots. But if you want to speculate on ETFs, that's fine too. Maybe some of the ETFs, these gold funds, maybe some of them will collapse, maybe some of them won't. I advise my subscribers on certain ETFs over others, because I trust certain proprietors over others. But you can't really speculate on physical gold and silver as much as you can speculate on gold and silver ETFs, and use those vehicles as leverage on the gold price to make even more profits.
When you say ETFs, are you referring to things that are based on the price of gold, or are you talking about the gold mining companies?
ETFs, there can be gold mining ETFs, which they own gold mining shares, and then you own that ETF. There are also gold funds that are backed by physical bullion in either London or New York, and we could argue about whether they actually are. I can't vouch for any of them. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But if you want to speculate on the gold price, then these are the vehicles to use. If you want actual gold for safety, then yeah, I would recommend either using a trusted third-party storage. I use gold money, or storing it yourself, but I wouldn't store it in a bank, in a safety deposit box. That's a big mistake. Keep it out of the banking system. You don't want it there.
And what would you say to people who say to you, "Oh yeah, you can't buy bread with gold and silver"? You ever hear that before?
Yes, I've heard that before, and they're just philosophically speaking, or economic science speaking, they're wrong, because right now you buy bread with gold and silver, because the only reason the dollar has any value is because it can still buy gold and silver. The minute that it can't, then you won't be able to buy anything with the dollar anyway, and the dollar will be useless. But once the dollar is gone, I mean, gold and silver will be money directly, because the dollar will be useless. So what do you think you're going to buy bread with? I mean, some magic, or something that's been money for all of human history. It's pretty clear. I mean, if you're a Bitcoin guy, maybe you could argue Bitcoin will maintain its value, but I don't really see that, because when the dollar does fall and the dollar hyperinflates and becomes useless, then it'll be gold versus Bitcoin. And the question is, will Bitcoin be priced in gold, or will gold be priced in Bitcoin? I think Bitcoin will be priced in gold, and gold will be the money. And Bitcoin, it might be useful, but it's still going to be much more volatile and more dangerous. But if you want to speculate on it, I don't have a problem.
In your newsletter, do you actually analyze or evaluate or recommend specific gold mining companies or silver mining companies? Or are
Yes.
Eric?
Yes. There are some. There's a lot of research to be done here. First of all, in these times when gold prices are rising to records, you have a very dangerous environment where charlatans come in and you have these pump and dump stocks where they say, oh, we discovered this gold mine over here, and we just they're trying to raise money, and everyone's buying gold now, so they try to trick people into buying these worthless stocks. That happens sometimes. You got to stay away from that. But also in terms of the responsible companies, the real gold mining companies, there are miners that wisely are hedged against the rise in oil prices. And what makes a gold mining company profitable is the distance between the gold price and the oil price, because gold miners essentially buy oil or buy energy and sell gold. So the bigger the difference between the oil price and the gold price, or the higher the gold price is above the oil price, the more money they make. So there are gold miners now that are very wisely buying diesel futures, right? So that they can lock in these low oil prices out to 2022, 2023, and maintain these very high margins, because at the point when the dollar collapses, then oil prices are going to go up too, not because the demand for oil is so high, but the demand to get out of dollar positions is so high. So that, gold would obviously rise in that environment also. But if you can lock in these margins now, you'll do much better than your peers. And there are some miners that are doing that, and there's some miners that aren't. So I advise my subscribers to get into those stocks that are being wise now and can see the writing on the wall.
Yeah, I remember when I first got invested in gold back in about 50 years ago. The first company I invested in, only because I didn't really know very much at the time, was Newmont, and it just so happened I know that Newmont was invested in oil as well. I thought was, in retrospect, a lot of foresight. I don't know what their current status is with that, but I remember at the time they did have oil in reserve, Newmont Mining. That's just one name, but I'm sure there's many other companies. You used the term before, hyperinflation. Believe it or not, most people don't even know what it is. So maybe you can give a little bit of an explanation of hyperinflation and how you think that'll come about in the United States.
Well, I described it a few minutes ago, but let's review. So hyperinflation, it's not really prices going up and up. It's a psychological turning point where let's put it this way: the reason that money has value, the reason that a dollar has value, aside from it being an intermediate for gold, which I said before, what makes a money valuable is the fact that people do not want to spend it, that they want to hoard it, right? They want to keep it as a reserve. You don't spend every dollar in your bank account because you expect to have future expenses, and the fact that you do not spend all your money immediately gives the money exchange value. Right?
You're not a millennial, obviously, because otherwise you're saying the opposite.
Well, I think I'm on the verge. I'm 1983, so maybe I am. I'm not sure. I don't think like one. I hope.
Yeah, exactly.
So what gives money any value at all is the act of not spending it. But once people realize that prices are not going to stop going up, and once that becomes the main driver of economic action, as was happening in the late 1970s until 1980, price inflation was by government measures, it was 14-15% annual, and the only thing that was able to stop it back then in 1979, 1980 was that the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Paul Volcker, who just passed away, and he was the only, he was pretty decent as, the head of a central bank goes.
That's a
But
relative term.
well, yeah, well, he was the least bad. I would
Yeah.
say he pretty much saved the dollar until until now. What he did was he jacked up interest rates to 15, 17, 20%. And the higher interest rates go, the more you get paid for holding dollars. So that increases the willingness to not spend dollars. Now, when foreigners that own all these trillions of dollars overseas, when they start handing them in for commodities, which is already happening, and imports become way more expensive, then it's not going to be like food prices are trickling up 5, 6, 7%. It's going to be 1 month, they're going to be up like 30, 40%, and everyone in America is going to go like, oh my God, what is going on? And then there's going to be a psychological turning point, like some kind of a click in their minds, like, I got to get rid of these dollars as fast as possible because they're just going down. And then at that point, there's going to be nothing that the Fed can do. There's going to be nothing that Congress can do. It'll be over because there's so much debt that even raising interest rates to 5, 6%, it would bankrupt the federal government. There'd be no way they could pay the interest. It's over. It's already over. It's just a matter of time until this psychological turning point hits, and the dollar loses everything. Theoretically, what they could do is the government could say, okay, we're not paying the debt anymore, and everyone who owns any treasuries is going to lose everything. That would save the dollar, but it would also collapse the entire banking system. So there's a dichotomy here that at the end game, Congress can either pick, it's going to be the dollar or it's going to be treasuries. It's one or the other. You can't save both.
Now, what about the fact that recently, just the last several, the yield on the 10-year has gone up pretty heavily relative to where it was, because as people move out of the debt market to the stock, you need to raise rates in order to attract buyers for your debt, for your treasury bonds. And you think that could adversely affect the price of gold? And in fact, is it possible that it has in the last week?
No. I'm not the kind of investor or trader that worries about day-to-day movements or even week-to-week movements. Markets wiggle and they hiccup and things happen, and you gotta identify the trend and the basic logic that's moving it. But if you want to look historically, the most ferocious rally that gold ever had, from 1978 to 1980, where it quintupled in the space of 2 years, that was specifically in a time when interest rates were skyrocketing to records. So it's not interest rates that matter. It's interest rates relative to the inflation rate. Meaning if the Fed is behind the curve and price inflation rises, to say it's 5, 6%, and the interest rates are only 4%, 4 or 5%, you're still losing money on your dollars. So if the Fed is chasing inflation by hiking rates, which they can't even do now because they can't hike rates to any level, the debt is so humongous. So yeah, these rises, there's going to be hiccups in interest rates, but really it has nothing to do with the gold price anymore.
What about the fact that most market participants today believe that there is no inflation rate? That's what you get, because they believe what the government is telling them. And what?
Yeah. Well, the people on Wall Street can think that because they're busy making money on all these bubbles, with all these, the Robinhood millennials coming in and SoftBank coming in and jacking up the prices of these call options. Everything has become so leveraged that, yeah, as long as Wall Street's making money hand over fist because everything keeps going higher, then they'll say there's no inflation because what do they care? They're making so much money. But like, talk to somebody on a fixed income that there's no inflation. Yeah, it's a bunch of bull. Inflation is very high. The CPI was just published today, and food prices came in again at 4% annual. Used car prices are going up at 11%. What does this mean? Because transportation and energy are going down, They're still way down for the year, because when you make travel illegal and you make lockdowns, the way of life, then what do you expect to happen to the price of oil? The price of garbage, even in a hyperinflationary economy, is still zero. Nobody wants it. But wait for these lockdowns to get loosened up, if that ever happens. But then you'll see the CPI as a whole really, really skyrocketing.
One of my friends, I'm sorry, one of my friends, Judy, I won't mention her last name, but she was telling me that one of her friends sold a house in New York for $1 million or so, which is nothing these days in New York. And she told the friends, take the cash that you're walking away with and buy gold and silver. And so the friend spoke to a stockbroker, and the stockbroker said, oh, no, you can't do that. Gold is way too volatile. Does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, what commission does a Wall Street guy get on gold and silver? Not much. He wants you to buy companies, to buy speculative companies. That's what he's for. None of these Wall Street guys make much money on gold and silver. It's not very popular. And if gold and silver start to skyrocket, that means that the whole securities industry is in big trouble. So they want to look out for their own industry. I get it. That's
okay. Your service is a subscription service, right? I assume it's a newsletter format. And how many times a year does it come out?
It's a daily commentary. I review what happened in the markets for that day. I have a focus on the precious metals markets, even though I do talk about treasuries and the interrelationship between debt and gold, and I talk about stocks also. So it's a daily commentary, and then I have a special weekend report that I go deeper into the futures action of that week. Every week, the CFTC publishes figures on which bullion banks are trading and how many contracts they own. So we track those numbers, and I'm seeing some very interesting anomalies that have, quite frankly, never happened before in futures markets. Very weird stuff.
Such as
one example that I'll give you is that until September, until around September, we've never there's two kinds of contracts on the commodity exchange. There's spot contracts and there's future contracts. Future contracts are for future delivery. You buy a contract now, let's say for February, March gold. You can buy the contract now, and then you can call for delivery in February, March. You can also buy a spot contract, which is for immediate delivery, which would be this month would be November gold. Until September, we have never seen spot contracts being bought and delivered on the same day. It's because futures contracts were used as leverage on the gold price. Very, very few deliveries were ever taken. I think it was less than 1% of gold contracts traded were taken for physical delivery. But in 2020, we've seen records, all-time records of physical deliveries being made, and we're seeing for the first time traders coming in to buy the spot contract of that month and then call for delivery the next day, which means that these futures markets, for the first time ever, maybe since the late 1970s, but I don't have data going back that far, for the first time since then, at least, spot contracts are being bought for immediate delivery, which means the entire commodity exchange is being used as a physical delivery service, which has not happened since at least the late 1970s.
I see. For the potential subscriber, why would you say this newsletter is? What's the best part of it that you think would be the most valuable in terms of use?
It depends what kind of person you are. I mean, I try to what I want to do is I want people to understand what is happening and why. I want to give them the right picks. But my investment strategy, I think, is fundamentally different from almost any other newsletter that I've subscribed to personally. And I've subscribed to many in my 12 to 15 years of doing this, and I've only recently become confident enough that I can do it myself. And but how I'm different from other newsletter writers is that to me, trading and investing, it's not necessarily about making the right calls at the right time, which I try to do, and which certainly helps. But there is no one system. There's no one trading system that is the holy grail, that is the answer. Because if there was any one system that was so much better than any other system, any other trading system, then everyone would have subscribed to it already, and then no other system would work. I mean, markets don't work like that, where you can have one system that predicts everything. So the most important part about trading, which I try to emphasize to my subscribers all the time, is that you want to keep your emotions bracketed, meaning you have a worldview, and my worldview is that gold and silver are real money, and the dollar is about to fall, about maybe a year, maybe two, but it doesn't matter exactly. What matters is that you have your positions, and that you imagine what the best and the worst case scenario is given your current positions. If there's suddenly a huge drop in gold and silver and your portfolio goes down, which can happen, and it's temporary, would you be able to withstand that sell-off and continue and stay in the game? Or would you panic out and lose everything? On the other hand, if you do not have enough positions and all of a sudden gold skyrockets, goes crazy, are you going to be in the other emotional state where you're like, oh no, I don't have enough positions, I have to buy this, I have to chase this, and I have to run after it? That's emotions in the other way. That's unstable emotions in the other direction. So we keep positions balanced for everyone's emotional level, whereas no matter what direction is hit, people always maintain emotional balance where they're able to think rationally and buy the dips if there's a dip with enough cash, and if the market goes in the other direction, goes too high too fast, you have enough positions where you don't feel you have to chase. So emotional balance is the constant. Human emotions are pretty constant, whereas if you can imagine a certain scenario, you can extrapolate what you'll feel. So if you can stay rational, stay in the game, you will eventually win, and that is what I try to teach.
Okay, two final questions.
Yeah.
The first one is, how do people reach you, and how do they subscribe? How do they learn about you? Where do they go?
You can Google Endgame Investor. It's a service on Seeking Alpha, and you'll find the landing page there. That'll describe the service for you, and you can sign up right there. It's pretty simple.
Okay.
And I'm sure you can put a link on the bottom of this video. I'll give it to you.
All right, great. And final question, how would you compare the economy / financial condition of Israel to that of the States?
Well, Israel, the shekel is entirely dependent on the dollar, entirely. The Bank of Israel owns no gold. So when the dollar falls, when the purchasing power of the dollar falls close to zero, the shekel is going to fall too. And that's the sad part of it. But here, I guess in Israel, the lockdowns it's much more of a police state here than in America. In America, there's still a value of liberty as a value among many sectors of the population, including you. And we have some allies.
I'm not a good exemplar, I can assure you.
Well, look, there are socialist forces in America. That's absolutely true. But there is still a sense. There's still a sense that liberty, that America was founded in liberty, conceived in liberty, and that still exists in America. And there's still some pushback. Israel is more of a socialist, communist founded country, founded by communists, administered by socialists. What we have going for us is that people are, at least Jews, we will fight with each other and will kick and scream and yell and disrespect each other, but I don't see much of a chance of a physical civil war here. If things get bad, we tend to come together, and that's why I'm staying here. I'm pretty afraid of America right now. When things really break down, what's going to happen in the streets, and I don't want to be there for that when it happens. I'd rather be here. But economically, Israel and America, in terms of the monetary system, are tied. They're joined at the hip. Whatever happens to one will happen to the other. As America prints, Israel prints, and their money supplies will go up together, and they'll go down together.
Ironically, when Sarah died, Abraham, her husband, how did he pay for her grave?
Arbamos shekel kesef over lasocher. So yeah, 400 shekels of silver. The Torah says over lasocher, which means pure silver that's passable as currency, legal tender anywhere in the world. This is the silver parsha.
So Abraham, our father, had more seichel than most Jews of today.
Yeah, he always did.
Well, listen, God bless you. Thank you so much for being on the program. I'm sure we'll do it again. And I would urge everyone, if you want to educate yourself and become an autodidact, somebody who self-educates and isn't brainwashed in these pathetic government schools or by the pathetic media, go to Rafi's service and start educating yourself. And I appreciate your being here. God bless, and all the best to you.
You too, Bob. Really nice talking to you.
You too. Take care.